Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, August 18th, 2025. Larry Johnson will be with us in just a moment with his thoughts on what went on in Alaska on Friday, including from an intelligence community perspective. But first, this. My friends, if you care about your liberty and your right to control your own future, you need to hear about this. From October 10th to 12th, Mikkel Thorpe, host of the Expat Money Show, is bringing together top experts from around the world for the Expat Money Online Summit, and it's completely free to attend. You'll learn how to legally protect your wealth, secure second residences and citizenships, reduce your tax burden, and own property abroad, all to safeguard your freedom. This year's focus is on Latin America, where opportunity is booming. Argentina is shifting to free markets. El Salvador is undergoing a dramatic transformation, and Panama and Paraguay are offering simple residency programs. A Plan B is no longer optional, it's essential. Reserve your free ticket at expatmoneysummit.com. And if you want VIP access with special perks, including lifetime replay access and exclusive VIP panels, use promo code JUDGE for 20% off your upgrade. That's expatmoneysummit.com, promo code JUDGE. Larry, welcome here, my dear friend.
Hi there.
What is your big picture take on the events in Alaska on Friday?
Talking to each other, not shooting at each other. So that was the first step. Putin clearly, I think, won the power move visuals. His was the second plane to arrive. He was the second one off the plane, and he got to walk the red carpet. And Trump, to his credit, and you've been around him, and so sort of let's call it the false Donald Trump and the genuine Donald Trump.
Right.
It was the genuine Donald Trump greeting Zelensky. Genuine warmth, and so I'm not Zelensky, Putin. Sorry, there won't be that genuine warmth today greeting Zelensky. But it in a way it brought Putin in, it humanized him, because in the West, the propaganda against Vladimir Putin and Russia in general is unrelenting in portraying Putin as evil, a child killer, a murderer, a war criminal. He's the worst human being that's ever been alive. If you base it on what's being said in the West, so there was that. But also, Putin, in a very calm way, was able to explain to Trump what the Russian position is without any of the CIA filters preventing Trump from hearing the truth.
So I think, and I agree with you entirely, Larry, you look at this with a different lens than I do because of your intelligence community and State Department background. But I think that Putin's lecture, I'm going to use his phrase, on the genesis and causes of the Ukraine crisis, is probably the first time Trump heard that version and that understanding of events, and heard it with that level of articulation and intellectual support.
Yeah, I know some have argued that Trump actually had the correct information, but I disagree, and it's based upon two different articles written by Seymour Hersh, and in each article, one dealt with the Russian casualties, the other dealt with the how the war in Ukraine is being framed by the intelligence community, because Sy has very good sources. And whoever this person or persons he was talking to, they were in the intelligence community. He identified them as an intelligence community sources. And when they're telling Sy that 2 million Russians have been killed and wounded, and they're telling Sy that this is just a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia, then they're sending that same information to the president.
Hmm.
And Trump is not one on his own, out of his own curiosity. If he's not seeing it on television or watching it, maybe on a podcast like yours, he's not picking it up. And there is, as we've seen repeatedly on all major news channels, the ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, Fox, CNN, not a single member of the people that you talk to on a regular basis every week is allowed on any of those channels.
No.
McGregor used to get on occasionally with Tucker, but once Tucker went away, Doug McGregor went away. So there is no alternative voice presented where Trump could actually have a reasonable chance to hear something different. It's a controlled narrative.
Well, this is another whole story, is banning people like you, McGovern, McGregor, Ritter, all of whom used to be on Fox and elsewhere. This is a tragedy for the American public to understand what's going on. But the flip side of it is that shows like this and the others on which you appear and where our other regulars appear have flourished and are a principal news source for many people.
Yeah, let me emphasize, I'm not arguing that I should go back on TV, because I much prefer sitting down and chatting with you. We can actually have discussions, because you remember what it was like on Fox.
When you and I first met, they were all over me, what I would say to you, what the others would say to you. We had 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Here we can probe deeply into all aspects of an issue, as we do now, as we do every Monday, as we do every Friday with Ray. But you mentioned something that I found curious, and I thought of it over the weekend when I was characterizing your segment here as a view of the Alaska conference from the intelligence community perspective. What did the CIA have to do, if anything, with this, and what did they do to prepare for it? And I assume they were there with the other Americans.
Well, yeah, I mean, the John Ratcliffe was there, and so I'm sure he had an aide or two. The role of the CIA in that instance is to make sure the president has the best information about what are the Russians, what are they going to say, what is their intent, what are the factors governing their decisions. But again, I could have given that brief, and I didn't even need access to classified information. It's real simple. Stop expanding NATO to surround Russia. Stop it. Dismantle NATO, because Russia has no intent to attack Europe, and they certainly have no intent to occupy Western Ukraine. They are fighting to defend the Russian speakers in that part of Ukraine that have, frankly, a legacy with Russia that goes back a millennia, more than 1,000 years. So this is nothing recent.
If you're viewing the show with the video, we are periodically showing the automobile entrance to the White House, where we expect President Zelensky at any moment. And as we see him, or Chancellor Merz, or Prime Minister Starmer, or President Macron, particularly if President Trump greets them, we'll pan back to that view for you. Did the CIA monitor President Putin, Foreign Minister Lavrov, and the others while they were there? And if the answer to that is yes, did the SVR, whatever they call themselves today, the old KGB, monitor Trump and Rubio and Hegseth?
Well, by monitor, do you mean electronically intercept, try to...
Yes. Did Trump know what Putin was whispering to Lavrov?
Probably not. I've heard someone suggest, who was it? Pompeo, one of these knuckleheads was saying, "Oh my God, Trump let Putin into the back seat of the Trump limousine, the presidential limousine. Putin could have planted a bug. He is that crafty KGB guy." And it's like, oh my God, please.
Mike, if you were the Secretary of State, what would you have done? Thrown a cross-body block to prevent him from getting in there after the president invited him?
He would have tried to stuff him in the trunk or make him run alongside the limo. That was probably the most fascinating point of it, because you did get a brief glimpse of Putin smiling ear to ear and in the back seat. So that was the only time that Trump and Putin really were there to discuss one-on-one, with no interpreter, with nobody else around except the driver up front. And, that may have been where they actually, sort of agreed on what the course of events would be that day. Because, originally they were supposed to have that one-on-one meeting at the meeting site, but instead it turned into a 3-on-3 with Lavrov and Rubio accompanying their bosses.
Magic glasses that can see clearly without glasses? This glasses can not only see far.
I'm not sure what that was.
Yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, all right. Maybe that's the CIA letting us know that they're around. All right, so you don't believe that they were actually monitoring the communications amongst the Russian delegation, and you don't believe that the Russians were monitoring the communications amongst the Americans?
Nothing beyond what's routine. I mean, look, there are the Russian version of the NSA as well as our own NSA. Yeah, they'll be targeting and collecting. They're always collecting. They don't turn it off. It's like an unseen eye, or with no eyelids, constantly open, constantly looking, constantly collecting. But I don't think that there were special activities directed that day. They're just because, if for no other reason, to avoid creating a diplomatic incident.
I see where another one of my former Fox colleagues got in some hot water. Monica Crowley. I didn't know this. She's the head of protocol for the executive branch. So she and her crew apparently were up there about a week ahead of time, and somebody printed out the personal schedules of President Putin and President Trump, showing every move that each was going to make from landing to takeoff, and they left it in a printer in the hotel.
Yeah. I hadn't seen that, but what that illustrates, the way this narrative unfolded. So you go back a week ago Thursday, Witkoff is in Russia meeting with Putin, and then supposedly it's out of that we'll meet, and then they struggle over the weekend to figure out where's the meeting going to be. Just the fact that Monica Crowley was involved in that way, they knew before Witkoff went to Russia, I'm sure, that this meeting was going to take place. Right. And in fact, that may have been the purpose of Witkoff's going, just to update Putin and Lavrov and Ushakov on, okay, this is where we stand. This meeting is going to come off. I think much of this was staged drama.
Alistair Crook is of the view that Witkoff either inadvertently or intentionally misunderstood something President Putin said to him, and it resulted in this bizarre phrase that President Trump picked up on, called land swaps. Mm-hmm. But what are they talking about, Larry? The President Putin couldn't give away Russian land even if he wanted to, right, under Russian law.
No more than Trump could have said, "Hey, Vladimir, I'll tell you what. You give up Ukraine, I'll give you back Alaska." He couldn't do that. No, I think what's really at stake is the Russians have moved into Dnipropetrovsk. They've moved into Sumy and Kharkiv. They haven't taken those areas completely, but they do have control of some territory. So Putin's in a position that he can say, okay, I can withdraw my forces from these oblasts that have not yet voted to decide to become part of Russia. But in doing that, he's sort of making the veiled threat that these can become part of Russia if you don't reach a peace agreement. In fact, the Russians have made that very clear, that unless Ukraine comes to a decision, stops the fighting, withdraws its troops, stays out of NATO, and keep the NATO forces out, that Russia will continue to expand operations east of the Dnieper River and will ultimately, I think, incorporate other territory like Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, and Sumy, Poltava into Russia in the same way that Donetsk, Luhansk, Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson have been.
So look at the distance we've traveled, Larry. Not 6 months ago, 4 months ago, General Kellogg was saying things like, "We're in favor of a standstill, and NATO is going to enforce it, and NATO will be all over
Right.
Ukraine, and that'll be the ceasefire." Now, the President of the United States is against a ceasefire, in favor only of a permanent treaty of peace, and NATO is to have nothing to do with it. Has General Kellogg and the neocons been thrown under the bus by Donald Trump?
Yeah, it looks like it, and I hope that's the case. Trump's problem is that he does not hold any Trump cards. He doesn't have any leverage in this case over Russia. A lot of people are trying to say, "Oh yeah, Russia's economy is struggling. They've got enormous problems on the horizon." And I said, "Wait a second. Russia's debt to GDP ratio is 14 to 19%, depending on how you calculate it. The United States is 125%. So what that means is if you get paid you produce $100 a day worth of service, but you're spending $125. So you're spending more than you're taking in. And that's exactly what the United States is doing. That's what the UK, it's at 100%. So basically, it's as much money as it can borrow, it's spending it. And France is at like 110%. Well, a financial crisis hits, it's not going to be Russia that's struggling. It's the United States, it's the UK, it's France. And even if Trump now shifts the burden to Europe to fund the war in Ukraine, they don't have the ability. I mean, that's where these people are living in a complete land of delusion. And I can show you some commentary from some people who'd be considered prominent Americans that genuinely believe that the Russians are suffering massive casualties. They've lost their economies on the cusp of collapse, and Putin is unpopular, and there's no way Russia can continue this. And it's like, guys, look in the mirror. Yeah, you're projecting your own weaknesses, your own flaws onto Russia. Russia doesn't have those.
Wow. Chris, I'm not sure what some of those things on the screen are. That is really wacky, whatever it is. I'll tell you what frightens me, Larry, is the use of the word security guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
But what is, I don't know how you could know what Witkoff was talking about, but what are he and Rubio talking about security guarantees? Is that American troops on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, what the West would like is, yes, to have NATO troops in Ukraine that will be there as a buffer. Russia's never going to accept that under any circumstances. That's what they've been fighting this war for over the last 42 months. So they're not. That won't be accepted. Now, would Russia accept peacekeepers from India, from Brazil, from China? Sure, because Russia is going to have a say in this. And what the West, all these Western so-called experts fail to understand is Russia is going to get what it insists it needs: the demilitarization, denazification of Ukraine, or else they will settle it militarily. They didn't start this war because they didn't like Ukraine. This didn't start because it was just a beef between two neighbors, as many in the United States try to present it as, or a struggle for territory that Russia lusted for Ukrainian territory. None of that. This all came down when Putin presented the draft treaty for security that would have incorporated what to do with NATO and Europe. And that was presented in December of 2021. And it was rejected completely, with Blinken basically telling the Russians, go pound sand. You're not going to tell us what to do. And Putin said, we have no choice. Because if they had not launched the special military operation, Ukraine would have launched within days a massive attack into what was left of Donetsk and Luhansk, and they would have taken complete control of it. And then literally NATO would be on Russia's borders. And that's what Putin stopped.
You and Ritter and McGregor and the others with military backgrounds have told us that Zelensky is effectively a puppet by ultra-nationalists. Pepe calls them Nazis. We're not supposed to use that phrase on air. Whatever you call them, ultra-Ukrainian nationalists. Do they recognize the deplorable state of the military and that defeat is inevitable, or are they just blinded by ideology? Or stated differently, what freedom does President Zelensky have this afternoon? He's almost on his way up the driveway, by the way. But what freedom does he have to negotiate with President Trump?
Well, he has no leverage. He's completely dependent upon the United States. But he's also controlled by these oligarchs in Ukraine, the mafia. That's one aspect of the story that really has not received much attention. The fact that the level of organized criminal activity that has spread into the rest of Europe with Ukraine as a base. And it's been funded and fueled by a lot of the money that we've sent over. As I mentioned to you, there's right now the Department of Defense Criminal Investigation Division has an open investigation into $48 billion that were siphoned off, taken into banks, and at least 23 members of Congress, of the U.S. Congress, both House and Senate, have received kickbacks out of that money. So that's all being investigated right now. And, so this is more, like I said, this is not just about a beef that Putin and Zelensky don't like each other, and therefore it's a fight over territory. And if we just settle that, no. There's a lot of deep, dark forces at work behind the scenes here.
But back to what Zelensky can agree to. He simply cannot, correct me if I'm wrong, say yes to Trump this afternoon if he expects to put his head on a pillow back in Kyiv tomorrow.
Well, that's true, but he may not be planning to put his head back on a pillow in Kyiv. He'll settle for Miami Beach just as long as the head is still attached to the shoulders. That's the key condition here. I don't anticipate that Zelensky will be amenable to accepting the deal that Donald Trump's going to put on the table. So with that, if that turns out to be true, then the most likely outcome of this is Trump is going to be faced with a choice. Either walk away from it and say, fine, I'm going to, Ukraine and Russia, you guys sort this out. We're out. We're not going to have any more involvement. That would be the wisest thing to do because it would be the quickest way to bring this to an end. But if Trump doesn't do that, then he's faced with, okay, I'm going to now go back into an antagonism mode against Vladimir Putin, and we're going to up support for Zelensky, and we're going to go after China and India, which you've already seen Trump, despite the tough talk, he's backed away from that because I think they now, at least in private, realize that it'd be self-defeating, self-destructive to the United States.
Larry, thank you very much, my dear friend. We'll know a lot more when you and Ray and I are together Friday afternoon, and I look forward to that already. All the best to you.
All right, my friend. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And coming up this afternoon at 2 o'clock on all of this, Colonel Douglas McGregor, and at 3 o'clock, Netanyahu is still slaughtering people. Aaron Mate, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.